Audio recording for this meeting has begun.
Thank you. This is Captain Angela Matungwa. I am the Director of the Division of Commission Personnel Support in the Office of Human Resources in the Indian Health Service. As such, I'm also the Commission Corps Liaison for IHS. And I'd like to welcome you to our second monthly IHS Corps Officers All Hands. We really appreciate you all taking time out of your day to join us, and hope that the information you received today is helpful. Just some housekeeping tasks. Please remember to mute your phone throughout the call. I know we say this on every call, and it never fails that there will be people who do not look at their phones and ensure that it's muted. Please do so now and make sure your phone is muted. Thank you. Towards the end of the call, we hope to be able to take questions via phone. Some of that will be dependent on if we are able to control the muting situation and the IT challenges that we may face. Otherwise, if not, please do plan to type in your questions or comments in the chat box. The chat box will be made available during the Q&A section for those who wish to ask questions. So as we are going through some of the questions that you all submitted via email, you'll see the chat box and you'll be able to type in any questions. So we do want to make sure that this is at least somewhat interactive to be able to take questions during the session if possible. I think that's all for me. And so before we get into today's agenda, Admiral Wiaki, sir, would you like to provide any opening remarks? Sir, if you are speaking, we are not able to hear you. You may be muted.
Captain Matungwa, how's that? Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. I was double muted. All right.
In there.
Okay. Well, thank you, Angela. And I appreciate this opportunity. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for joining today's IHS Commission Corps Officers All Hands call. I want to leave a lot of time open for discussion, so I'll provide just a few brief updates about the work taking place across the Indian Health System of Care. As cases of COVID-19 continue to rise, we must renew our sense of personal accountability to protect ourselves and those around us. With colder weather and more people staying indoors, we find that pandemic fatigue is setting in. In order to stop the spread, we must think about alternative ways to stay connected with our friends and our loved ones this holiday season. Travel increases your chance of getting and spreading COVID-19, so staying home is the best way to protect yourself and others. Our goal is to slow the spread, decrease hospitalizations, and decrease fatalities while also keeping the economy open. The IHS continues to enhance our testing capabilities, and as part of the efforts by the Department of Health and Human Services to improve testing access for the most vulnerable segments of our population, the IHS has received and distributed over 300,000 of the Abbott Binax Now rapid point-of-care COVID-19 tests. These tests support the IHS's efforts in both our tribal and urban Indian communities, where there have been recent increases in new cases and hospitalizations related to the ongoing outbreak. To date, more than 1.36 million COVID-19 tests have been conducted throughout the Indian health system, which is equivalent to approximately 82% of the IHS active user population, and it exceeds the overall U.S. testing rate of 57%. Data from testing helps further guide our response efforts to help reduce the spread of COVID-19. With regards to a potential COVID-19 vaccine, last month we released the IHS COVID-19 Pandemic Vaccine Plan, and this plan details how the IHS healthcare system will prepare for and operationalize a vaccine once it becomes available. It also provides important guidance for all of our IHS federal, our tribal health programs, and our urban Indian organizations that choose to receive a COVID-19 vaccine coordinated through the Indian Health Service. IHS recognizes the sovereign authority of tribal nations to provide for the welfare of their people. And we reached out to our tribes and our urban Indian organizations for their involvement in planning efforts through tribal consultation and urban confer. Each of our tribe and urban Indian organizations also provided us with their preference for COVID-19 vaccine distribution, either to come through the IHS or through the states, to ensure that the vaccine is effectively delivered throughout Indian country. The IHS Vaccine Task Force will continue to adapt the distribution planning process as new information and federal guidance evolves. In addition, IHS is working to determine what funds are available and authorized for the purpose of administering the vaccine, including to our non-beneficiaries that are served in our facilities. And we will also be issuing guidance on those questions in the near future. Many of you may be aware that HHS recently announced the allocation plan for a new COVID-19 treatment from Eli Lilly called bamlanivimab, or what I've been referring to as BAM because of that tongue twister name. This treatment received an emergency use authorization from the FDA and is used for mild to moderate COVID-19 in non-hospitalized patients. I'm pleased to report that the IHS has begun distributing our limited supply of BAM to our IHS federal and tribal clinics based on requests that we've received and the current burden of patients with COVID-19. IHS has received 1,800 doses, and we continue to work closely with HHS to communicate the needs of the entire Indian health system to increase our supply of BAM. I appreciate the support from our tribal partners at both the Alaska Native Medical Center and the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, which will both host pilot projects to establish feasibility and develop best practices for deploying BAM in Indian country. Our IHS National Supply Service Center continues to coordinate and manage the distribution of pharmaceuticals, medical, and other healthcare-related supply items to all of our ITU facilities and programs nationwide. And in addition to the COVID-19 test that I mentioned earlier and the distribution of BAM, the Supply Service Center has distributed over 78 million units of personal protective equipment and over 2,100 vials of remdesivir throughout the Indian health system. Before I close, I'd like to remind everyone that with flu season upon us, it's important to protect yourself, your family, and your community by getting an annual flu shot. As officers, this is a requirement, but we also want to be vocal public health leaders in our individual communities to encourage all of our families and friends to get vaccinated. This is especially important during the COVID-19 pandemic to reduce the overall disease burden as well as any unnecessary stress on the healthcare system by decreasing hospitalizations and reducing influenza diagnostic testing demand. I appreciate the work all of you do to promote Native health and your continued dedication to supporting the Indian Health Service mission of raising the physical, mental, social, and spiritual health of American Indians and Alaska Natives to the highest level. I again want to thank you for this opportunity to provide some brief remarks here today. Please remember to stay safe and continue to take responsible individual actions to stop the spread of COVID-19 by following the 3 W's, wearing a mask, washing your hands, and watching your distance. With that, I'll conclude my remarks and turn it back over to you, Captain Matangwa.
Thank you, sir. Always nice to hear remarks from you, and appreciate hearing all of the exciting things that are going on. I plan to get my flu shot tomorrow in the office, so thank you.
Excellent.
Right.
Glad to hear.
All right. Hopefully everyone can see my slides on the screen, and we will send these slides out or make them available on the DCPS website along with the recording. once IT is able to get that online. And thank you to OIT for their assistance, both with the webinar as well as with getting the documents and the recording onto our website. So today I just wanted to briefly go over the annual cohort deadlines. Hopefully you're aware that the deadlines have been extended. So just want to remind officers of what those are, talk a little bit about where we are with Commission Core Awards, and hopefully dispel some myths that are out there related to the processing of COVID-19 related awards. And then I want to talk about permanent promotions. We've received a number of questions and wanted to really try to clarify the permanent promotion policy, especially the failure to promote piece of that. Hopefully you all are aware that I am a former promotion coordinator for the Commission Corps. And so as such, I, of course, had to know the policy, but also was involved in the convening of the 14 promotion boards per year. Definitely do not purport myself to be a subject matter expert anymore, being several years now, 6 or 7 years removed from that position. However, hopefully I understand it enough still to be able to talk with you about the permanent promotion policy and to answer some of those questions. And then we'll talk about some miscellaneous topics. We want to take the questions that you all submitted via email and answer those. And then hopefully at the end we'll have plenty of time to take some additional questions. And so keep a lookout for the chat box to be made available as we are going through some of your submitted questions. So very briefly, I just wanted to go over the 2020 annual cohort deadlines. Of course, the cohort rating period is from October 1, 2019 through September 30th, 2020. So the 2020 fiscal year. The updated deadlines, the annual cohort is due to the rater was due to the rater November 25th. That certainly snuck up on me. I'm not sure about you, and so that date has passed. If you have not gotten your cohort to your rater yet, definitely try to do so and definitely be in contact with your rater to let him or her know the status so that they can plan. And you want to give your reviewing official plenty of time to get the cohort done at his or her level as well. And so the online annual cohort is due to the reviewing official from the rater by December 23rd, 2020. It's due to your agency liaison, which will be your regional liaison if you're out in the field, or it will be me or Captain Verdugo if you are at headquarters. That's due to us by January 15, 2021. And then we have the responsibility of getting it to CCHQ by January 31. So our goal really will be to have all of them done by January 15th. And so we really appreciate everyone's assistance with helping us to get those done on time, and especially for those who are eligible for promotion. So briefly, awards, near and dear to everyone's heart. We definitely want to endeavor to increase the number of awards that are submitted for IHS officers, as well as make sure the level that is submitted is appropriate for the achievement. And we want to improve the quality of the awards that are submitted as well. And so just for your awareness, we process it, and by we, I mean the IHS Commission Core Awards Board, as well as DCPS, the Division of Commission Personnel Support, which I'll refer to as DCPS. We've processed over 300 awards and submitted those to Commission Corps headquarters by their November 6th deadline for promotion board. So the first Friday of November every year is the deadline for agencies to submit awards whereby CCHQ will commit to processing them in time for them to be available for promotion boards. And so between January and November 6th, 2020, we submitted over 300 awards. Most of those were done between August and November. There was a pause, as you all know, because of a new policy We also paused because of COVID-19 activities, and the IHS really made it a challenge for us to convene the boards because all of our board members were heavily involved with COVID-19 response activities. They still are, but we prioritized the convening of the board so that we could get those awards processed, as I mentioned, by that November 6th deadline. So there you can see a breakdown of the by award type. With the person with the baby, it is a sweet sound, but if you could mute your phone, we would really appreciate it. We can hear you. You have an open mic. Thank you. Love to hear the sound of a baby cooing, just not right now. Thank you. So the Distinguished Service Medal or the Meritorious Service Medal, those high-level awards, we processed 2 of those. The Outstanding Service Medal, OSM, we processed 29 plus 1 that is with Valor. The Commendation Medal, 76. Achievement Medal, 141. The Citation, 48. The Outstanding Unit Citation, 7. And then the Unit Commendation, 39. And so you see the breakdown in kind of the levels of awards there. I think that I'll just briefly mention, I think there may be some myths in that officers in IHS cannot receive awards or they can't receive awards for quote unquote just performing clinical duties and things like that. And that's definitely not true. In a subsequent slide, I'll refer to our website, but we do have some awards guidance there, and I encourage you to take a look at it. But if you have any questions, to reach out to us and feel free to ask as well. We are happy to help within DCPS. Officers or potential nominators with understanding whether a potential achievement or intervention is award worthy and at what level it might be nominated. And so that type of guidance is also on our website, but we're happy to help anyone try to make sense of that. And so we want officers also to be aware that awards processing in CCHQ, it is significantly delayed due to COVID-19, one, because of course, they had to pause in what they were doing while they had all hands on deck dealing with pivoting to deal with COVID-19 activities as well. But also because of the pause, there was a pause when the new awards program policy came out and the new POM in July or August timeframe. So leading up to that, they didn't want us to submit any awards to them until the new awards program policy came out so that the awards could adhere to the new policy. They did ultimately give us sort of a grace period through which if we had received awards that were pending, we could still submit them via the old process, or if they were the 2-page justification instead of 1, if they were on the old nomination form, we had a grace period where we could submit those. So as a result of this, they literally have thousands of awards in the queue that are pending. That means there's a backlog. They don't have a large award staff. I'm not sure if they have more than one person doing awards. I know they do have one. Obviously, because of that, it's a significant workload. So you officers, there will be a significant delay before you see the award show up on your PIR. If you have questions about where the status of your award, you can first direct it to your area awards board, or you can send it to the IHS Core Awards at ihs.gov mailbox. If you have not checked with your awards, your area awards board, that probably will be the suggestion. And then if it is at the IHS awards board level, we'll be happy to check and confirm the status. But as I mentioned, all of the awards that we received by the first week in November, we processed and sent to CCHQ. And so we are not able to provide updates on the status of awards once it leaves IHS. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you where your award is in the queue if it's at CCHQ, because I just don't have visibility on their process there. So officers, you really should not expect to see an award on your PIR, your Promotion Information Report, before mid-January. I mean, that is the earliest. I really wanted to say before the beginning of February, but I don't want it to get too late. We will continue to check in with the Commissioned Officers Awards program at CCHQ to get a sense of how close they are to finishing, so that we can hopefully have time to give you all an all clear to say, check your PIR, award should have been processed, check your PIR to see if it's there or not, to give us some time to follow up if we know we submitted it before November 6th, to ensure it gets in your file. There is an open mic. Thank you. And so that's it for awards, for at least the status of awards there. Continuing on, just to talk about some of the COVID-19 related awards, the COVID-19 campaign medal has been approved, and that is going to be awarded to all eligible officers on duty, Corps-wide, who are on duty during the award period that's specified in the policy. And CCHQ is going to generate a list of those officers based on active duty status at that time. Of course, it's eligible officers, because if an officer, not any of you, of course, this won't apply, but if an officer was lacking an administrative requirement, had a letter of reprimand or other disciplinary action during the award period, then you may not be able to receive this campaign medal. So it is based on eligibility as outlined in the policy. So we'll all receive that if you were active duty and if you were otherwise eligible during the award period. The Crisis Response Service Award, or CRISA, that's also a possibility for officers who deploy to an activity that essentially meets the criteria outlined for the CRISA in the policy. And so that's another award that may be awarded. One thing that I didn't put here that may potentially be on the table is the Response Service Awards for some of the more local activities. That might be a possibility as well, but for COVID-19 especially, we're probably looking at the CRISA for those activities. Individual and Unit Honor Awards. So we have received questions where officers are getting conflicting information about whether we are accepting awards related to COVID-19 activities. The answer is yes. The IHS Awards Board is accepting COVID-19 awards. Now that's with some caveats, because these awards are going to be approved and submitted to CCHQ on a case-by-case basis. So they will be reviewed by the board depending on if it's a CM or above, then it is reviewed by the IHS Awards Board. If it's achievement medal or below, it's just reviewed through an administrative process and not a board process, but they all will be reviewed. And so awards that are covering activities that are performed by hundreds, maybe even 1,000 of IHS officers, those are going to be returned or held. And so we can't give out 1,000 OSMs for officers doing the same activities or similar activities. Those will be incorporated into a larger area, region, or IHS-wide unit award. As I mentioned, there's going to be the campaign medal. There may be other service awards we'll see. Certainly outstanding unit citation is on the table, or unit commendation, depending on what the achievement is. And so we have to, for some types of interventions and achievements, we have to wait and probably pool those into larger awards. And those will include things like testing, contact tracing, and ICS, or Incident Command System activities. And those are where we know there are hundreds, minimally hundreds, if not 1,000 IHS officers who are performing those activities. And so unless there are unique interventions or accomplishments that are distinguishing, we will hold those or we may return those. And we will give feedback through the area awards coordinator if they are returned or if they're being held. Otherwise, if there are unique interventions, if the officer is doing something that is unique and doesn't fit into those large buckets, then we can process those, and we will process those. So again, we are accepting COVID-19 awards, but we ask that you be judicious and think about whether it is really something, think about the award level, whether it's reasonable and things like that. But we have seen some awards that we've had to return for things like I've said, we've seen OSM nominations for a couple of months activities for testing, contact tracing, things like that. Those are things that in general we're not going to be able to approve at that level, and not for individual honor awards, again, unless there are unique interventions or accomplishments. Just some general awards guidance. So as I mentioned, we really want to increase the number of awards that IHS officers are being nominated for. You guys do great work, important work, and awards are one of those things where it takes time and it kind of falls through the cracks often because we're so busy doing other things that have to get done. These are the things that we tend not to do, especially because we often neglect our own careers in that way, our own recognition, because we are doing the work of the agency and taking care of the mission. And while I applaud you all for that, and that's one of the things I love about IHS officers and working in the Indian Health Service, I also want to help us do a little bit better in making sure that our very worthy officers are appropriately recognized for the great work that you all are doing. And so we have some guidance on our website, but we are also offering some webinars and trainings for potential nominators. And so, for instance, we held one in the Navajo area where Ms. So, the area director, arranged to have that for CEOs and other area leadership, so they could understand how can they best recognize their officers, which is important to them, and I know important in areas across the IHS. And so we do offer that type of service. We'd be happy to put on an area specific or service unit specific training to help potential nominators understand what makes a good award justification, avoid some of the pitfalls and things like that. So, but we also have guidance on our website that's available all the time. So do start planning early for submission to the IHS Awards Board. So if you're up for promotion next year, we need to receive it by early October to process it. That means you have to plan ahead for it to go to the Area Awards Board, well, first through your supervisor, and through the nominator, through that supervisory chain for signature, to the Area Awards Board, build in time for that, build in time for them to get it to the IHS Awards Board, for us to process it, review it, get signatures, and then submission. And so really start to think about it now or the first of the year to really do that. And it's something, even if you're not up for promotion, every so often, and it's not to chase awards or anything, but when you are doing great work, when you have some significant accomplishments, it's just a good idea to regularly touch base, and on a semi-regular basis, to just touch base with your supervisory chain on how you're doing, if you're doing well, if you have a sustained period of superior performance, or if you've done a special project, you've been acting, you did a collateral duty, things like that. Time to think about perhaps an award nomination. Again, not chasing awards, but just recognizing the work that is being done as part of taking care of the career in general. And so we return a lot of awards for rewrite because they lack impact or they're unclear. And some of the issues that we see is things that are missing and things that should be in a good justification. What was the problem? What was the process? What was the situation that the officer resolved or improved. Oftentimes we see the intervention without enough information, background, context for us to understand, okay, why is that important? What was the problem before? Tell us the before and then the after, then we can clearly see what the impact was that the officer made. And then the intervention itself, what specifically did the officer do that is award-worthy? So keep in mind your audience. So your audience may not be from your specialty, may not know the specific process or project or the technical lingo. So you really have to make sure that you're making it basic and understandable and geared towards an audience who is not familiar with what you do, and connect the dots between the intervention and the impact. So what the officer did, and be specific, especially if you were part of a work group or committee, or there are a number of people working on something. If you want an individual honor award, it's important to really distinguish between what the officer did that's different from the work of the unit, work of the committee, because otherwise it should be a unit award, right? If the committee did something or the work group did something, then we're looking at a unit commendation or an outstanding unit citation. So just things like that where not specific enough sometimes, or not connecting the dots to show this is what the officer accomplished, now this is the impact. Now when looking at impact, you want to use things, metrics like cost savings, time saved, other efficiencies. Use those metrics to make it clear. We do have a hot mic. Please, whoever is talking, please mute your phone. Thank you. Okay, so just some awards guidance that hopefully is helpful. Moving on to permanent promotion topics. All right, so just some talking a little bit in general about permanent grade. So the permanent grade is the lowest grade to which an officer may be reduced without cause. So a permanent grade is established by law, and many officers want to know, why are we still doing a temporary grade and a permanent grade when the other services only have one grade system? It's a little bit, it's not really straightforward. If we go to a one grade system, it's going to be to our permanent grade, because that's the one that's required for us to have by law. And so for many of us, our permanent grade might be lower than our temporary grade. And so the desire is not to be demoted in rank if we move to our permanent grade. So part of the conversation has to be, how do they move from a temporary and permanent grade system to permanent grade and still maintain the rank that the officer has in the temporary grade, because it's going to be the permanent grade because it's the one that's required by law. But it is the lowest grade to which an officer may be reduced without cause. So let's say there is a RIF, reduction in force, which is very, very unlikely. But what if there were? The permanent grade is the lowest grade that you could be reduced to in the course of a RIF. So I know officers think, oh, the permanent grade doesn't matter. It could matter in a situation like that. The other place where it has mattered is as a tiebreaker for temporary promotions. Two officers have the exact same score, and they're at the line for the success rate, the cutoff line. The one that has the higher permanent grade will get the benefit of the tiebreaker and would be the one that gets promoted. You'd be surprised how frequently that can happen, especially in the larger categories like pharmacy, nursing, HSO, where the scores tend to be very close. That tiebreak has mattered for officers and has been the difference. And so permanent grade does matter, and that's what the permanent grade is. The assistant grade, so when you look at the law, which is 42 U.S. Code Section 211 that talks about permanent promotions, when you look at the permanent promotion policy, Commission Core Instruction 331.01, it will refer to the grades by these names: assistant grade, senior assistant grade, full grade, senior grade, director grade. So I just wanted to put here which grade that's talking about, because it's not always readily apparent. And so assistant grade is O2, and then you can see the others there, that's what that is. It's important to know what those are when you're looking at the law and the policy to understand which grade they're talking about. So one of the questions that has come up is non-competitive permanent promotions. If it's non-competitive, how come it has to be reviewed by a promotion board? I think that question came up at one of the town halls, but I just wanted to cover it to make sure that it's clear. So 42 U.S.C. Section 211, as I mentioned, talks about promotion of commissioned officers. Section A of that passage says permanent or temporary promotions, examination. Each permanent promotion shall be made only after examination. Examination means reviewed by a promotion board. That's what that's intended to say. In Section C, examination says examinations for promotions to the assistant or senior assistant grade shall in all cases be non-competitive. So recall that the assistant or senior assistant are O2 and O3 for permanent grades. It says that in all cases they must be non-competitive for promotions, permanent promotions to O2 and O3. So the only way for promotions to O2 and O3 to be reviewed by a board, but also be non-competitive, which the law just does require, is if the success rates are 100%. So, and that's exactly what they are. And so that's why they are non-competitive, but also reviewed by a board, because the law requires the examination, but then it also requires the promotions to those grades to be non-competitive. And so the success rate being 100% allows CCHQ to do both. So really the only way to be unsuccessful for permanent promotion to O2 and O3 with the 100% success rate is if you're not recommended by the promotion board, which to do that, you really have to either have not prepared your file at all, or you have to have some major, typically, I can't speak for every situation, but typically you either didn't prepare at all, and typically on top of that, you have some major, an officer, not any of you, an officer has some major performance or conduct issues. That's typically when we may see a not recommend for O2 or O3, because it is very atypical. You essentially have to work hard to be not recommended by a promotion board for O2 and O3. Or an officer is removed from the successful list. They would have been promoted. Their score was high enough. Of course it is, because it's 100% success rate. But they were removed from the successful list because they lacked one or more administrative requirements, which means you didn't have a current unexpired license on record, you had an administrative action like an AWOL or letter of reprimand, or you failed to meet basic readiness, or you didn't have the most recent core on file. These are all things that are completely avoidable, and so we definitely don't want to see anything like that happen, and it's very frustrating and unfortunate when we see that happen at times with officers. And so bottom line, though, is that it's completely avoidable to be unsuccessful for promotion to permanent O2 or permanent O3. Continuing on, talking about failure to promote. This is one of those things that I think has been a hot topic because it is of concern for many officers. When the language talks about if officers fail to be promoted twice in succession for a permanent grade, that they could be separated. So for obvious reasons, that's of concern. But I'm hopeful that after this conversation that you will feel a little bit better about it. Obviously, permanent promotion still important, as I mentioned, not just for the reasons that I mentioned in terms of the tangible benefits of the tiebreaker, as well as what could happen in a potential risk, but also just because when you are eligible, It is a reflection on an officer if you fail to prepare your file, especially the higher grade. If you're up for 06, let me tell you, you better prepare your file for permanent promotion. Failure to do so has in the past made it appear to promotion boards that the officer has now, you've made 06 in the temporary rank and now you're just neglecting your core career. You don't care anymore. They will at times deal swiftly and harshly with an officer at that level who gives that impression. So it is important. And it's more so as even more so now with the failure to promote provision really being implemented. So in the law, Section F says an officer who is not promoted in permanent grade and who has twice been unsuccessful in succession will be re-examined once. So who has not twice been unsuccessful in succession will be re-examined once. So the first time that you are unsuccessful, the law says you will be re-examined one more time. Section G says separation from the service upon failure of promotion. An officer found unsuccessful for permanent promotion to O2 will be separated first time. You only get one time when you're up for permanent O2 because of what I just covered in the other slide. It's 100% success rate, so you've had to work hard to be unsuccessful for O2. They will separate you that first time. Permanent promotion to O2 is non-competitive, as I mentioned. This has always been in the law, so it wasn't fully implemented before. What was sort of done by policy, or at least by process previously, was that if an officer was recommended or not recommended, then they would look at what the situation was, and have that reviewed by the CCHQ director, and that officer could be spared depending on the circumstances. It sounds like that's not really the case now. The officer will be separated because they are following the letter of the policy. So that's it for O2. So Section G continues on. If an officer, after having been twice examined for promotion, other than promotion to a restricted grade, so take note of that because that's going to be important later on, other than promotion to a restricted grade, if they twice in succession fail to be promoted, if in the assistant grade, so you're O2, but you're eligible then for permanent O3, the officer will be separated from the service and paid 6 months basic pay and allowances. I just want to mention that the law itself says he, which is why I didn't say he or she. I just sort of copied what the law says, and it does use the male pronoun. But the officer shall be separated from the service. We do have a hot mic. If everyone could please check your phone. Actually, look at your phone and make sure that you are muted. Thank you. So if the officer who's up for permanent O3 fails to be successful for permanent O3 twice in succession, that officer will be separated and paid 6 months basic pay and allowances. Again, 100% success rate. You've had to work hard to fail to be successful for O3. If you're in the senior assistant grade, if you're an O3, eligible for permanent O4, that officer twice in succession, unsuccessful, will be separated from the service and paid 1 year's basic pay and allowances. If in the full grade, which is O4, meaning you're eligible for O5, the officer shall be considered as not in line for promotion, which means you're not going up for promotion again, and at such time thereafter as the Surgeon General may determine, will be retired from the service with retired pay. The important part there is such time thereafter as the Surgeon General may determine, because that gives some flexibility, meaning it doesn't mean you're going to be retired right away. You may be retired later depending on what the SG says, so there is flexibility there. This has also been in the law the entire time, but was not really fully implemented. The way that CCHQ looked at this, and it was true even when I worked there. It was if you were not recommended, or then we looked at it that way. But the point, when an officer was not successful 2 times for permanent grades, we didn't implement this for whatever reason. And so CCHQ, looking at the letter of the law, they are fully implementing it. However, they've also done things to ensure that the impact of it is not as high as it once was or has the potential to be. So getting back to Section G, again, it says if an officer, after having been twice examined for promotion, other than promotion to a restricted grade, if that officer fails to be promoted. So the important piece is other than promotion to a restricted grade. That means those that are in the restricted grade are sort of exempt from this piece. That's important because it gives an officer an out. Restricted grade is defined in Section B. Says the President may, by regulation, provide that in a specified professional category, permanent promotion to the senior grade, 04, or to both the full grade and the senior grade, shall be made, full grade 04, senior grade 05, shall be made only if there are vacancies in such grade. A grade in any category with respect to which such regulations have been issued is referred to as restricted grade. So essentially what that says is in specific categories, promotions can only be made if there are vacancies in those grades. Those are called restricted grades. Restricted grades then are permanent 04, which it mentions the full grade, and permanent 05, the senior grade, in the restricted category. The restricted categories are all categories except medical and dental. Medical and dental are the only 2 non-restricted categories now. All others are restricted. And that actually changed. CCHQ actually changed that in order to minimize the impact of this particular provision of the law. Okay, so note that the other than promotion to the restricted grade. Since all the categories are restricted except 2, we now have an out. We now have sort of an exemption for this provision. So to summarize, permanent promotion to 02 and 03, 100% success rate. As long as an officer submits documents, meets the administrative requirements, there's little or no risk of separation for failure to promote to P02 or permanent 03, because everyone should be promoted to P02 or P03. So not a lot, shouldn't be very much anxiety there. Restricted grades are permanent 04 and permanent 05 in the restricted categories. So they're accepted from the failure to promote provision that I just talked about. So that means for almost all the categories, going up for permanent 05, going up for permanent 04 or 05, not scary anymore because of that provision of except in the restricted grades. So CCHQ, again, making almost all the categories restricted, really minimizes now the potential number of separations that would result from the failure to promote piece of it. So CCHQ did take steps to shift engineer, scientists, and vet categories to restricted to decrease this risk. They were previously not restricted, along with medical and dental. Making them restricted again means for 04 and 05, that failure to promote piece doesn't apply. Section C and the policy, the permanent grade policy, Section 6-6, also minimizes the risk to unrestricted categories, because I can imagine that those of you who are in medical and dental are saying, well, what about us? That leaves us exposed? No, because specifically the policy, the law says that those categories will have an 80% or more or higher success rate to P04 and 05. And the policy actually outlines that it will be 90% for promotion to P04 for medical and dental an 80% success rate for promotion to PO5. So again, the vast majority of medical and dental officers will be promoted with the success rates being that high. So again, it now has minimized the impact of this failure to promote provision for most officers. So I hope that helps. I hope that was clear. I'm happy to take questions when we get to that portion. The chat box will be made available to you so that you can start to type in your questions related to anything that I've covered. So hopefully that was helpful. So answering some of your questions. So some of the questions that were submitted to us via the IHS Court Inquiries mailbox, of course, I want to cover all of them. I covered a couple of them that were about awards, and these are some of the others. Essentially, the officer saying it's a challenge for many IHS, for many sites to support training, long-term training. So the question, are there any opportunities geared toward IHS officers or advice for how to go about applying to one of the fellowships that have been advertised for corps officers in a world of pandemic budget shortfalls and chronic understaffing? So it's definitely a challenge for many IHS sites, as well as many HHS optives and non-HHS agencies to be able to support long-term training or to be able to pay an officer's salary for, let's say, 6 months or a year for a fellowship or a couple years for other types of long-term training. Most supervisors are supportive of professional development opportunities and would support participation in fellowships or long-term training if they had the funds and the staffing to do it. And some have supported it. We actually do have a number of IHS sites that outside of COVID, COVID obviously has made life difficult for everyone, but before COVID, we actually have a number of IHS sites that have supported long-term training on a regular basis. And so it is happening. It is possible. Right now, it really is a challenge, but it's a challenge, really worldwide, not just within IHS. And so definitely would encourage officers to continue to have the conversations with your supervisory chain about what might be possible. Also, there are times when we've seen officers transfer from one site to another site that does offer those types of opportunities. And are able to be sponsored that way as well. But essentially, have the conversation, see what might be possible, and if you continue to have questions, please reach out to us to talk about what the options might be. Also, please keep in mind that we are hopeful that funding may be, improved for IHS as an agency, as well as we continue to explore potential recruitment and retention incentives for officers that are assigned to the IHS. And as those things come to fruition and the staffing improves as a result, those opportunities will open up. And so there are things that are in the pipeline that are in the works that can't necessarily talk about. They're very preliminary, but we are very hopeful that things will continue along the track that they are going, and that we'll have some of those incentives and some of those funding things in place that will really make a significant impact on the staffing levels and will open up some of those opportunities. Next question. I've been deemed an essential employee by my organization. I've been performing contact tracing since March 2020. How do I go about submitting my deployment at home, quote, deployment at home activities in order to get deployment credit, possible service award eligibility? So we've covered this quite a bit, including in our last month's all hands call. And so we are working through the area directors to receive lists of officers in each area and headquarters that are working on COVID-19 activities that are considered internally deployed, if you will, for these types of activities. And so we really, right now, we don't need officers to submit anything. We're working through the area directors and office directors at headquarters to capture that information. That being said, we do want to make sure that we have all officers who are performing these types of activities captured. So at some point in the next few weeks, we will put out guidance IHS-wide to officers to say, okay, look for an email from us that says, dear, Commander, I'm an engineer, please, here's what we have for you. We have that you are performing these types of activities from this date to this date. If that's accurate, you don't have to do anything. And then to say, if you don't receive an email like this from us, but you are working on COVID activities, to then follow these steps. So while we're working through area directors, office directors, CEOs to capture this information, we do want to make sure we go through an additional step to hear from officers that, wait a minute, I'm not on the list. I haven't heard from you here, and give you that opportunity to tell us, here's what should happen. And we'll give you that guidance. Of course, it's going to require some verification from the supervisory chain, but in essence, we just want to make sure we've captured the work of every IHS officer who is essentially internally deployed, for lack of a better term. And so we don't need you to do anything now, but I do need you to look out for an email from me or from the IHS Court Inquiries mailbox. And always, please look out for those things. I try to be very judicious. We all do in DCPS, try to be very judicious with what we send out to you all, because we want you to understand that when I'm emailing you, it's important. And so please make sure that you are opening the emails that I send or that we send from DCPS, and that you're reading it, because it's important information. And so that will be one of them upcoming. We're still working on the process. But again, we will have a process to make sure officers have the opportunity to say, I should be on this list, and it appears that I'm not. All right. From the last all-hands call, we got this question that it was mentioned that to update a billet would first require an update of the position description, or PD. And the officer says this makes sense to align the two. But in the past, I understood HR to say that if the update is substantial enough to warrant a billet adjustment, then it will require PD reclassification and subsequently require re-advertisement of the position. How can this be accomplished without re-advertising the position and the incumbent officer having to recompete for their own position? Really, really thank you for asking this question. Because honestly, I didn't really know, I wasn't sure I knew the answer. And so talking with HR at headquarters, we're really taking a look at this process. Perhaps we don't need an updated PD. And so we are looking at the process to objectively receive and verify information regarding an officer's duties if the officer supervisor feels the officer is performing more than the initial PD and initial billet would determine. That happens frequently because officers are oftentimes given additional duties to their position and not necessarily given the credit. And so we are looking at a process to do that. I think we've identified something that will work, that's already in place on the civil service side, that probably could that we could leverage. And so it may not require a PD, and it also then would allow for billet updates without a PD and certainly without having to re-announce the position. Now later on down the road when the officer is vacating the position, because if those duties that he or she took on, if they're going to stay with the position, then the PD should be reclassified at that time and part of the announcement then. But that's ideal, right? We don't want officers to have to recompete for the position they're already encumbering. So I appreciate the question, which did prompt the conversation and prompted us to see there may be a different way that is outside of the PD. And so we definitely will put that out and make that available to HR and continue to hone our processes to do what really makes sense. If tribal sites are phasing out officers and posting positions not open to core officers, are we reaching out to that leadership to see why? Or is there anything we can do to expand core friendliness in tribal duty stations? So we understand there are tribal sites that sometimes for different reasons decide they may not necessarily want to have as many core officers, or they don't really understand some of the core processes and things, which can cause some friction sometimes. And so is there anything we can do to expand the core friendliness in tribal duty stations, and do we reach out to them? When we are aware of these concerns, we absolutely do reach out. We will often work through the area leadership to get more information. And so the first thing is we really oftentimes don't know about this. We don't know that this is occurring. And so we really rely on officers to bring it to our attention. Once we become aware, we can take action to gather more information and open that door to dialogue with the tribe or the tribal organization to answer their questions, to dispel myths that they may have. Oftentimes it's a matter of misinformation or misunderstanding. And so we open that dialogue to be able to address those concerns and to see what can be done. Sometimes it's a matter of some discipline issues with officers, again, or misunderstandings, and we're able to broker resolution and to provide accurate information. But it starts with officers making us aware. Please don't assume that we know. Please do take the initiative to let us know. We'd rather have 5, 10 officers tell us the same thing than to have no officer tell us and it be a situation that we could have intervened and we could have successfully resolved if we knew. So we're happy to take those types of concerns and get involved, absolutely. Next question. I've heard on several occasions that headquarters CCHQ is trying to make our service ranks follow a pyramid type structure as seen in the other uniformed services. This situation seems to mean very limited higher level ranks and more people in the lower ranks. So talking about promotion. USPHS Commission Corps is not like the other services, as we do not operate as one contiguous service as others do. Therefore, it makes sense to have our structure follow what the agencies want our positions to be defined as, which defines the billets and thereby rank, and not basically arbitrary pyramid structure that works in the other uniformed services, because these services can control their own structure and operate as one contiguous service. So the question, why are we trying to follow this pyramid structure? It clearly does not follow the requests of the various agencies that actually pay our salaries and set our billets by default. Has there been any effort to work with those agencies to get their input into what they want, as they are the ones we work for 95% of the time? So interesting point, and really appreciate the question. Of course, as Corps officers, we're actually employees of the Public Health Service Commission Corps. We're assigned to our agencies, so it is incumbent upon the Corps to determine the structure of the force, because we are employed by PHS Commission Corps, and so they do have the responsibility to determine what the force looks like. Whether a pyramid is the best structure or not for the Corps is certainly a good question, certainly something that I encourage you to raise at the next opportunity for the town hall, for instance, when there's the opportunity to ask questions, because I think it's a good question to ask and to allow CCHQ to speak to their thinking on the pyramid structure as well. CCHQ has indicated that they intend to review billets, and that they have previously asked for agency input during the initial stages of those conversations. And they've signaled the intent to continue that dialogue. As the officer stated, the agencies own the positions that are encumbered by the officers, as well as pay the officer's salary. So the agencies do have to be part of the conversation. And agencies also, have the responsibility to speak up, to raise the concerns, and really to set the expectation for some level of accountability for the services that are being provided and for some inclusion in the decision making. So it's a great question that I think is best addressed to CCHQ at the next opportunity. But again, they have signaled they are reviewing billets, and they have signaled that they would like agency input on that. And so hopefully through that process, we can come to a structure that works well for all involved for where the Corps is at that time. All right, so that's all the questions that we received via the IHS Corps Inquiries mailbox. While we pivot to taking your questions via the chat box, just wanted to put up our website information so that you are reminded of some of the resources that we offer there, and that you can certainly avail yourselves of those things. So appreciate your time, and I'm happy to take any questions that we've received via the chat box, as well as any comments or remarks to any of the questions or anything Admiral Wiaki or other senior leaders, if you had any comments or feedback to any of the questions or anything that you wanted to add to anything that we've covered thus far, please feel free to speak up from our senior leaders. Otherwise, Ms. Dudley, I am happy to take any questions that we have via the chat box.
Yes, ma'am. The first question is from Lieutenant Commander Joy Calloway. She says, is there a delay in uploading influenza vaccine records to our dashboard? I have submitted it several times and don't see it reflected yet, and now it has been about 6 weeks.
Interesting. That's a great question. Thank you, Commander Calloway, and nice to hear from you. I am not aware of a delay in uploading influenza vaccination documentation specifically. However, I think that because of sort of flexibilities in place because of COVID-19, because staffing may not be at full capacity, if people may be out of the office due to illness or taking care of loved ones, or who knows what could be happening. Some of the civilian staff there could be on weather and safety leave and things like that. I'm not surprised to hear that there may be a delay. So what I would suggest is rather than resubmitting, please reach out to your regional DCPS liaison team and allow us to reach out to medical affairs on your behalf to see what might be happening and what the status is, so that we can hopefully obtain an answer for you. And then we also don't want a lot of duplicate submissions going to through eDocu, because again, that, we don't want them to duplicate effort and sort of slow down what they're doing as well. So allow us to reach out on your behalf and find out for you. But I'm not surprised that there may be some delay, so I've not heard of that specifically. Hopefully that answers your question, and we can go to the next one.
Next one is from Commander Stephen Sherling. It says, I was interested in seeing 2 DSM MSMs and 29 OSMs, one with Valor. Is there a place where these are publicized? How can others hear about these significant achievements from our coworkers?
That is a great question. We do not generally publicize the awards, but certainly I'll take that down and really get with the team to figure out if there is a way that we can do that makes sense. I think it would be good for morale. I think it would be great for us to highlight the accomplishments, especially those really high-level significant ones of our fellow officers. So appreciate that feedback, and we'll definitely take that down as an action item to consider how we may best be able to do that.
The next question is from Lieutenant Madison Adams. For the time being, if an officer is acting in a position that is above their current billet, how do you recommend we represent that in our cores, officer statements, and CVs, since it is not reflected in the PIR? Sorry.
It's a great question, and so and thank you for because I think it probably applies to a lot of officers, because again, officers tend to take on sort of acting roles and collateral duties, and so a couple different ways. So there is a distinction between acting and TDY, right? So TDY means you have been taken out of your current position and you're temporarily reassigned into another position. That's a TDY, whereas acting or collateral is you're still in your permanent position of record. On top of that, you're also doing something else. You're acting for someone else, and it's a collateral duty. So just want to make that distinction. If it's a TDY, then you can upload a memo, a TDY memo in the section that is TDY in lieu of personnel orders to reflect what the officer is doing. Much more frequently and more typically, it's an acting role on top of your permanent duties. So you can put that in the collateral duties section of your CV. There is a section for that generally on most CV formats, so you want to capture it there. Your officer statement, it may not belong on the officer statement just because the OS is generally for support of Commission Corps activities, not agency support activities. But where it would go is on your reviewing official statement. Your reviewing official can definitely capture the work you're doing that is above and beyond your position description in the reviewing official statement, in the contributions to agency mission section, potentially in the leadership portion section of that as well. And so it's definitely should go in the ROS. And then also you could be nominated for, as we talked about, an individual honor award to capture that as well. And then a letter of appreciation is another way of recognizing and having them recognize what you're doing and specify that you're performing above and beyond and what some of your accomplishments are. So those are some of the ways in which that can be recognized. Thank you again for the question.
The next question is from Lieutenant Commander Abby Bacon. Has IHS leadership looked into the disproportionate promotion rates among IHS officers compared to other agencies? Meaning, if we have 20% of the nurse officers, shouldn't the officers promoted reflect about 20% IHS nurses? Or do you even see the statistics for IHS promotion rates between agencies?
That's a great question. I will speak for myself in DCPS and not necessarily IHS leadership, and I'll let leadership who's on the call speak for themselves. But within DCPS, we absolutely are looking at the rates and giving feedback to CCHQ and CPOs about the benchmarks, about the recognition. We're not given statistics from a CCHQ level about how the agencies are doing, but because we know who was eligible, we know who was promoted, we are, crunching the numbers ourselves and determining the success rates and looking at the files and looking for trends and things that we can take back to either CCHQ or the CPOs and the PACs really have the responsibility of coming up with the benchmarks. And so those conversations are definitely happening. I know that CCHQ is open to hearing when, if they think that hearing from those CPOs specifically, if they feel like the benchmarks don't accurately reflect or not leading to the outcome that would make sense. I think the part also that I want to be responsible for IHS officers is making sure the documents are very well crafted. We sometimes run into situations where the documents definitely can be better. However, that being said, I know that there were some great officers who were not promoted in this last go round, and I reviewed their documents and gave feedback myself, and so I know that their documents look good, and so can't say for sure all of what happened with specifically this last promotion round, but certainly it is something that we track on an annual basis. It is an ongoing conversation, and CCHQ has indicated their openness to continue to have that dialogue. I'll pause. If members of IHS leadership wanted to add anything, feel free. All right, hearing none, I'll keep moving along. Ms. Dudley, next question.
Next question is from Mark. I understand the periodic health update is waived until March 31st. Does that mean that we may have 2 PHUs due in 2021? My birthday is in June, so I could turn in a PHU in March and then again in May to July. Or do I wait until May to July to submit my PHU? I simply want to be sure I'm clear.
Yep, thank you for the question. I will be very honest with you and saying I'm not sure that I'm clear on what the answer is. What is on the RDB self-service website is what was told to us a couple of town halls ago, and that is what I communicated in our own IHS All Hands last month, and that is that the March 31st deadline was for officers whose birthday months are in January and February, and that everyone else would get back on track with their birthday month. But I recognize that in the last town hall, what was stated in the last Commission Court town hall, what was stated seemed to imply that every officer needed to submit their PHU by March 31st, 2021, and that the RDB website is incorrect. It still reflects that information, and so we are looking to get clarification from CCHQ leadership on which interpretation is correct, the one that was previously given or the one that was given in the town hall this last time, especially because the website contradicts what was stated in the town hall the last time. So that is pending clarification, and once we do have it, we'll be happy to put that out there to all IHS officers or draw your attention to the website once we know whether it's accurate and or whether it's updated. But appreciate the question, and again, we definitely want to clarify that as soon as we have the clarity ourselves.
The next question is from Commander Alexander Varga. Was there a final verdict or update on hazard duty pay for IHS officers?
So thank you for that. So it's not about hazard duty pay for IHS officers. It would be a Corps-wide offering, and so right now that continues to be in the works. I think as we reported on last month's call, the policy only covers specific situations where it's authorized in a laboratory environment or research environment. Of course, many of our officers in IHS, officers who deploy to community-based testing sites, for instance, were not in a laboratory or research environment. They were in a real-world clinical setting, and so CCHQ continues to go through the process to receive authorization to pay the hazard duty pay for the types of environments that would most apply to officers in the Corps. And so that process is ongoing. That is the extent, I guess, of the update, is that that request continues to make its way through the various channels and is pending. But yes, and IHS continues to advocate for the payment of hazard duty pay for officers. Thank you for that question. Next question, please.
Captain Lisa Sumner asked, do we have a final ruling on continuing the multi-year retention pay for officers who had planned to retire before the retirement freeze?
Thank you for that. Great question. To my knowledge, we've not received a response. We have asked that question and have not received a response yet. And for others who may need clarity, additional context, many officers carefully planned out the end date of their 3 or 4 year retention bonus under HPSP, and because of the moratorium on retirements or suspension on voluntary retirements, their HPSP retention bonus may have expired, or they're looking at having to only enter into not even having the opportunity to enter into a 1 year because a 1 year RB doesn't exist. And so we have reached out to CCHQ to ask if there will be some type of relief for those officers, and we are awaiting response on that. We will have a meeting next week where we hope to raise it again or receive response. And of course, once we receive that information, we'll definitely put it out there to potentially impacted officers. It is a great question and one that we hope will be answered shortly. Thank you. Next question.
Commander Stephen Sherlin has a question regarding the COVID vaccine. Is there any indication that all PHS officers will be required to get the vaccine?
I have not heard that we will be required. Certainly if any of the CPOs or assistant surgeons general have heard anything else, please let me know. But I think it's something that certainly is being considered, but as to my knowledge, there's no decision of yet.
Yeah, this is Admiral Taylor. I think you hit it on the head. I think they're still deliberating, trying to determine if they can and if they want to, but no final determination on the COVID vaccine yet.
Thanks, sir. Next question, Ms. Dudley.
Chris Bradley asks, the P grade is used to break the tie for promotions, but what about all the senior officers who lost many years of creditable service when their P grade time was reset when the Affordable Care Act was implemented? Now there are many junior officers out there who have P grades with much higher P grades than these officers. What fairness is being considered for the approximately 1,500 officers impacted by this ACA reset?
I'm not sure I've heard what, I kind of heard what is being considered, but I may have missed a word there. But yeah, I mean, I heard that concern when I was promotion coordinator, and, you know, we are now 7 or 8 years past that. Officers, I would argue that officers did not lose creditable service per se in that. They kept their seniority credit, but what was lost was in the calculation of promotion credit that took place with everyone moving to regular Corps. And so I definitely have heard that question. I'm not aware of any discussions that would look to remedy that for any officer. It really only comes into play, as I mentioned, in a tie break, which it can happen, and it does happen. it can happen right at the line sometimes, but I'm not aware of there being any discussion of that. We are very far removed from that happening, and so if they were going to take action to remedy that, I think they would have by now, and so I would not anticipate there being any sort of relief for that. That was one of those sort of unintended consequences, I think, of implementing an all-regular core via the ACA in that way, unfortunately. Thank you for the question. Next question, Ms. Dudley.
Next question is from Commander Brown. If an officer is in an 04 billet and is interested in transferring within the IHS to a position that is an 06 billet, can they apply for that position, or do they have to be in an 05 billet first? Can they skip the 05 billet?
Yes, so officers can apply for positions that are higher grades. The position's higher grade than their rank, so the position itself is not required to be sequential in terms of the grade of the position. And so, yep, if you're in an 04 billet, you can absolutely apply for an 05 or an 06 billet. We are at the 5 o'clock mark, and so not sure how many additional questions we have, Ms. Dudley. If we can get through them quickly, I would like to try. Otherwise, if we have too many, we may have to take them and reply to them either via email or at our next monthly call. Any sense of how many?
There are 2 questions left, ma'am.
Okay, let's go. What's the question?
Captain David Harvey asks, can you request from CCHQ that they confirm with Walter Reed for officers in the DC metro area that they, Walter Reed, will be allowing Commission Corps officers to schedule PHUs based on the deadline Commission Corps headquarters requires?
Yes, we definitely will do that. They are aware. They definitely are aware that Walter Reed has declined to do many PHUs, apparently. I got mine done in August. I still don't know how that happened then, because I've heard from people before and after who said they were declined. So it does seem to be somewhat inconsistent. But absolutely, I know CCHQ is aware. They are monitoring. And so the March 31st date, if it is required for all officers, could shift as a result of what the MTFs are doing. But we'll definitely continue to endeavor to get confirmation and answers in terms of whether these MTFs are now making these available to PHS officers or not. Appreciate the question. Last question, please.
Catherine Arnett, I was wondering if there were any updates regarding the IHS pharmacy resident sign-on bonus that was not resolved from 2013 to 2015. And
no update, no resolution on that yet, but we are, as I mentioned last month, our plan was to reach out to the current chief pharmacist, and re-engage in that conversation, and that is still the plan, and I hope to have an update for the next call or to reach out to you all, those that are impacted directly, but it is still on the to-do list. We haven't forgotten it, and we'll definitely re-engage on that. There are significant challenges, and so I want to be very upfront with that and manage expectations in terms of how many years have passed, the availability of the funds, who would pay if the officer has transferred, all those things really make it challenging, but we definitely want to provide an answer because this has been ongoing for a long time. So definitely hold me accountable and keep asking the question until we have some sort of resolution, and appreciate the patience and you all continuing to raise that issue. Well, it sounds like those are all the questions that we received. I really want to say thank you all for your patience, for devoting the time that you did today. I hope the information was helpful. Please let me know if you have any questions about anything that we discussed. If you need clarity on anything that I mentioned, especially the promotion piece, which is, you know, it's a little bit complicated, and especially when you're working from the law. If you have questions, that means other officers may as well, and I want to try to make sure that your questions are answered. And so don't hesitate to reach out if you have other questions, if there are things that I may have missed that you would like to hear more about. Please do let us know. Keep the dialogue open. Otherwise, we look forward to talking with you all next month. Again, all the meetings we plan them to be the first Wednesday of the month at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, so that you can really plan ahead and schedule around it if possible, and if you find the information helpful. So I definitely wish you all well, and hope everyone stays safe and well and is enjoying the holidays. And before we adjourn, Admiral Wiaki, sir, did you have any additional remarks, or anyone from IHS senior leadership, if Admiral Wiaki had to drop off the call? I'm not sure.
Hi, Angela. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Just want to thank all of our officers for all of your hard work over what's been almost an entire year of pandemic response. Thank you for all that you do, and appreciate you dedicating the time to this call to get updated. And look forward to our next opportunity to greet each other in person. With that, we'll conclude this month's call. Thank you.
Thank you all. You take care.